I cleaned my room today. It's not figurative, it's literal. I took Jordan Peterson at his word. I felt a little bit funky today, so I thought I'd just clean my room and see if that improves my mood and well-being.
What'd you do? Wipe the cum stains off the wall?
Wipe the cum stains from under my armpits. No,
I was going to ask how the cum got there, but
I'll show you later.
I guess the next question was it your cum?
I'll show you later. It really worked. It really worked. It gave me a sense of achievement, which shows you maybe how low my bar is when I feel down. But yeah, it worked, man.
I always feel better when I clean my room. Not gonna lie.
Is he being literal, Jordan Peterson, when he says clean your room?
Yeah, because he said if you can't do that, if you can't, because it comes from. I take it that it comes from the place that people with problems, rather than facing their own problems, will always try and help other people with their problems. So
have you just described every SJW ever?
Well, yeah, in a sense. It's also.
I don't think SJWs have clean rooms. I'll be honest with you.
Well, that's exactly the point. So I think it extends probably to more of that. I think there's you get youth workers and low-level helping professions, where I think there's a lot of that. That's because you don't need a lot of training, because training filters out, like you say, in psychiatry or medicine or nursing or psychology, the difficulty of that training's often going to filter out the people that aren't in it for the people that aren't well adjusted and able to cope with the stresses and demands of those sort of professions. But that's not to say that some people don't get through. But I would say that, yeah, there's a bit of that goes on. So when somebody says clean your room, it's kind of like, actually you need to stop worrying about what other people are getting up to, and you need to start focusing on what's happening in your own life, and what better place to start than the place where you spend over half your life.
It's interesting because it's almost the Christian concept of he who cast the first stone. So in the sense of, like you said, if you're going to worry about other people's problems, then you should be able to actually get some of your own issues under control first, which obviously Jordan Peterson is rife with the values of Christianity that have been extracted by his work basically in exegesis and then put into his philosophy, which essentially makes him a thought criminal. How do you define clean your room if you believe in postmodernism and everything's relative?
Yeah, your room's relatively messy too.
My room's only untidy because of a fake normative conceptualization of what tidy should look like. Yeah. Maybe the tidiness is just as relevant as any untidiness.
Yeah, I think that's why you just get messy liberal people, don't you? Because that's the justification for it. It's like, who are you to say what messy is? And it's like, well, that's fucking messy. That's your room is the literal definition of what that word means. But
I find that liberals are definitely messier than conservatives, and it's interesting because no one talks about it.
Well, it's because
no one talks about that aspect of it, because it's the liberals obviously don't talk about it. And
because they can't identify it.
Yeah, because
you've got to be able to recognise that it's happening in order to address it.
Well, they think it's oppression even bringing it up. It's this normative oppression.
Yeah, it's clean normativity,
Exactly, and and the conservatives, I guess, just feel like it's almost beneath them to even bring it up, because if you're having to lecture on somebody why having used tissue,
because you learn that at school when you're 5.
Yeah, it's why you're having to lecture somebody that having used tissue papers wadded up with cum stuck to the side of your computer case is just not appropriate, and it's just not a conversation that you're willing to get into with a grown adult. So,
I think that the immediate thing that comes to mind is personality differences. So it comes back to conscientiousness and high trait orderliness. Mm-hmm. And those types of people are going to have clean houses. But who goes into a house? This is an interesting question, right? So obviously people can have their children removed if their houses are, well, they can not say removed, that's too extreme, but they can have run the risk of having social care becoming involved if their house is in such a state that their children
can't be found. Yeah, in amongst all the hoarding. Their children are suffering. They're not thriving because their house is a dump. So, at what point does the messiness become acceptable? Because if you walk into anyone's home that's messy, like if anyone walks in anyone's home that's fucking super messy, there's an automatic these guys are pigs. You know, well, I mean, maybe I'm projecting. Maybe I'm projecting onto the rest of everyone else, but I think most people that walk into a dirty house, the first thing I think of is like, I know which way this guy votes.
What morals does this person have?
There's definitely correlation between physical messiness and personality traits, and even mental cleanliness, in the sense of cleanliness of orderliness of ideas and idea formulation. Absolutely, there's this correlation between them. Like I said, it's just not something that people are willing to talk about. It's interesting. Maybe it's because people don't want to talk about people's houses, because it's seen as a little bit of a taboo subject, because your house is very, very personal to you. It's maybe tied into things like class as well. So it's not something that people generally want to discuss, because it can come off easily, depending which side you're on. It can either come off as elitist.
Well, if you're high in conscientiousness but also high in agreeableness, you might not comment on the messiness of someone's house. But if you're low in agreeableness, you might go, "Geez, your house is a fucking pigsty."
You might. I'm just saying, in the grander scheme of things, I think a lot of those conversations don't happen because, like I said, my view is because people's houses are seen as their refuge. And you're not supposed to kind of talk about...
Well, they're dumb.
Well, yeah, their refuge of where they left their self-respect. But it's just not something you talk about. You know, like it's like a common thing. Like you go to someone's house, and if you comment on that house, you know exactly what I mean. It tends to be positive comments are allowed, socially allowed. Negative comments, not so much. And obviously, the negative comments are going to be, it looks like a dump. So that whole line of reasoning gets snuffed out by social taboo. But an interesting thing that Jordan Peterson said in his podcast on Joe Rogan with Brett Weinstein, that he said that fascists, for example, in his readings of Hitler, displayed a high level of trait orderliness, and their view of the world was very much coloured in by wanting everything to be clean and orderly and neat, and that actually ended up translating into essentially lack of tolerance of others who were in any way seen to detract from that goal of neatness and cleanliness. And I'm not sure what that means, but I guess the future world is going to be very
it means that
it'll be multicultural and it'll be a dump. I guess.
It means that people that have done really bad things have got personality traits.
No.
I'm taking the piss, but yeah. Well, there's a certain combination there where it goes wrong. You know. What would a liberal fascist look like? Sorry, wrong way of putting that. What would a low conscientious, high agreeableness type person look like if they were committing genocide? Would that be like one of those paint splashings on the wall, but they're just like they throw paint against the wall and call it art?
Yeah,
except it's human bodies.
It's human. Let's logic this one out. That's a good question. All right, so fascism by definition has to be low in agreeableness because it is authoritarian. So it's you could argue whether or not it's conscientious or not, depending. I don't think that's nearly as pivotal. So you would have someone who's low conscientiousness and high agreeableness, right? So they are terrible at achieving things and really good at except art, but
which is entirely subjective.
But so the achievement is being subjective, yeah. And then high in agreeableness, so they'll want to form groups. So I guess what you'd be looking at is Antifa. Yeah, there's your answer. Antifa would be that group. So they'll be high in agreeableness. Obviously, they're out, doing armed protests, but as a group, they're very, very collectivist to the whole.
But if they're paid actors, then they might be very high in conscientiousness and orderly.
I've looked at those people. I've looked at those people. None of them are paid. They don't seem to have. They don't seem to have the accoutrements and lifestyle of someone who's got money.
So look, you just described the worst of those clusters of traits, the worst outcomes that you sort of get from that. But what would you say the advantages of each one are?
But what in those spectrum ends?
Yeah.
So low conscientiousness, high agreeableness. Yeah. Well, you end up with hippies. So I was kind of joking. The question was, what would the genocide look like? Well, it would look like Antifa. So the genocide would look very poorly executed because they don't actually have the metal to go through with it. So that's why, ironically,
or just even the gumption, like they just wake up some mornings and go, you know what? I feel mildly sad today. I'm going to take a mental health day.
Yeah.
I'll probably drink some booze later on.
I'll take an otherkin day and bark at the trees.
Yeah.
So, that's the problem.
Genocides just don't get done if your boss has taken days off.
You got to be on top of it. Otherwise the rats proliferate. That's what I mean. Like, that's what it would look like. It would look pathetic. It would look pathetic to the point that you can turn up for the genocide and the only people that get killed are you.
Can they be leaders, those people? Well, that's part of it too, because would people follow someone like that?
Well, that's my point. They can and they can't. So if everyone's high agreeableness, it's very easy to get people pushed in a direction. But your ability to push people in that direction will be very limited. So you can kind of get
herding cats.
Well, more like herding.
That's probably very conscientious.
Don't slur cats. It'd be more like herding dumb sheep. Like they'll stay in a flock, right? But none of them would necessarily have the like you were saying, the gumption and intelligence to know what to do once they're in a flock, which is kind of what Antifa get up to. That's why they can turn up to an event where they want to bash everyone's head in, and they are always the ones coming away with the injuries. Or, when the actual, people start doing self-defense.
They haven't got the personality traits that allow them to train for long enough at one thing to become good at it. Yeah,
they're not good at anything, So, including the genocide that they're trying to reap.
So what's the benefits of those?
Yeah, so if they're not trying to commit genocide, then I guess they are. I guess they're just kind of. I don't want to use the word hippies because I actually have a little bit of respect for hippies. They would be placid hippies. They would be very low productivity and very agreeable, whereas actually the hippies were relatively unagreeable. The hippies actually wanted free speech. The hippies actually wanted freedoms and were willing to, even passive resistance, but were willing to do something about them. Mm. And, you could argue that they're actually more successful.
Well, hippies were good at taking drugs. That's something they practiced.
They were.
That's something they were conscientious of.
Well, my point is that whatever tactics they used actually worked, as opposed to Antifa's tactics, which don't seem to be really working.
The difference. What would you say the difference between the hippies and Antifa? Hippies were. They weren't.
Antifa are anti-free speech. Hippies are pro-free speech. Yeah. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I don't really recall hippies sort of like going after people. They sort of went.
Hippies are individualist, whereas Antifa are collectivist.
Yeah. And so, from what I understand of hippies, it was very much they went against concepts rather than people. So, which is kind of like probably where you can respect them a little bit because they were against the concept of war as a way of resolving problems, which you can argue the ins and outs of whether war is beneficial or not in some situations. But they were generally against that, weren't they? They didn't walk around, as far as I know, I could be completely wrong, burning effigies of soldiers or whatever. They didn't seem to attack the individual.
For me, that's the core of it. They were pro-individualism, so they actually do, and I think that actually takes a certain amount of non-agreeableness because it takes for you to say, I know what I want to do. It might be different to what you like, but you can go fuck yourself, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with being separate to you. I'm okay with doing my own thing. I don't want you to change. I don't want you to affect me. I just want to do my own thing. I think that actually takes a little bit of moral backbone. I think that's further away on, for example, it's further away on an agreeableness axis, even if their openness access was very high because they were looking for new things, but they were looking for them individually, if that makes sense. Whereas Antifa seemed to want something new, maybe not, because in a way they're kind of soldiers of the establishment, but they are not doing it in an individual way. They need someone to tell them what to do.
But funnily enough, hippies were still very interested in community without being collectivists. Do you think?
I don't think they were. I think they were interested in the concept of the planet.
Well, I mean, you know, they have these things called communes.
Well, yeah, okay, but then what is that kind of hippie commune? Isn't it more like a group?
Rejection of, I'd say it's a rejection of a mainstream lifestyle would probably be part of it.
Correct. So it's somewhere to go to be free, not somewhere to go to be regimented.
Yeah.
Whereas the Antifa and the left that we have today is very regimented. This is what you believe. Like, you, to put it another way, you don't have different communes. You have the one doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
So they were actually happy to set up different communes, and you can go and do that. You know, you can go do that type of drug in that commune, or you can go to that commune where they do a different type of drug, kind of thing. Whereas
you can go to that commune and do all the drugs.
All the drugs. Whereas, yeah, with the left now, it's like no. There's actually, it's almost like a religion. There's a set religion that you follow regardless of where you go.
So what went wrong that we lost the hippies?
Nothing went wrong. The hippies are a lot of today's conservatives.
That's probably true.
That's the joke of it. A lot of these people that just, you know, want government out of their deal
became libertarians. Yeah.
Became libertarians. Yeah. I think today's hippies, yesterday's hippies are today's libertarians. They've got more in common with conservatives again than they do with the modern left. Because libertarians are just conservatives plus weed. In fact, this was where everyone was worried, because everyone was worried about Gary Johnson taking votes away from Hillary in the election, because they were thinking there was going to be a crossover between libertarians and Democrats. But actually, a lot of the people that were crossing over into Gary Johnson were ex-conservatives. I think there's feed from both sides. But a lot of those hippies, I think, ended up becoming kind of libertarians.